Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We are live once again, and I am very excited. We got Eric joining us, we got James joining us, we got Dave joining us. This is going to be an awesome, awesome show. Now, while I am just losing my mind over here, y'all should be a little bit at home. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live or drop these episodes, which right now we're live. So it's fantastic. Now, let's get into some intros right off the bat, and then we will dive into the rest of the conversation. Dave, you're on the bottom, so I'm going to bring you up first. 10, 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
Dr. Dave Riccuti. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina. I've done some stuff, but more importantly, I'm a dad of two 7-year-old Carmela.
Bam. Just like that. James, how about yourself?
I like that. I am a husband. It's my wedding anniversary today. Former firefighter and now podcaster, and father of one biological child and one bonus boy.
Yeah, Washington State cop, Western Washington, serving as a police commander, and all about wellness and leadership. Family man, got a little one and a wife.
There you go. And, Commander, again, coolest title ever. Sean, how about yourself? How's it going out there?
Going well. I think I'm going to try to match the velocity of what the boys are putting out. So I am, but I've got to go one level higher. I just got to do it. I'm the proud father of two awesome sons, and I also wanted to say congrats, James. I think it was your 9th. Isn't it your 9th anniversary?
It was
today.
It was. I don't know whether to be impressed or creeped out.
Right. Well, dude, I'm just trying to stay on top of social media. By the way, I'd be remiss not to mention that I just finished listening to the podcast on Behind the Shield podcast with James Geering, and the much anticipated guest was Eric Tung. What a coincidence.
Commander
and
Eric Tung.
Commander Eric Tung, on my dad. So it was a great episode. And as I just finished saying in the green room, what I really appreciated about the episode, because we've spoken to you guys a bunch of times and we're all very familiar with each other's podcasts, this one felt a little bit different because I felt that both of you really drew the best out of each other, playing off each other, and intellectually felt like you'd both elevated your game, working hand in hand in that episode. So for anyone out there who hasn't checked it out yet, go check it out, you nerds.
Bam.
Thank you.
Just like that. Well, let's start with that. James, how did that come together?
I'm sure there were mutual connections through the collective, and again, you obviously bring all these incredible people onto this platform. Not putting myself in that list, but then once we started talking and kind of into the Instagram platform, I think is a great community if you align yourself with great people and away from negativity. And so that's what happened. We started chatting, and then especially, I mean, I agree with Sean, when we hit record and we started talking back and forth, when you are in a deep conversation with a kindred spirit, someone who walks the walk, someone who cares strongly about the men and women that they serve alongside, it makes for a great conversation.
No doubt. Eric, how did it go for you?
Yeah, man, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the compliments, but I agree, right? It's that positive circle that we all choose to be a part of. The collective has been an amazing project. I feel very grateful for the fellowship, right? It's this iron sharpens iron notion, and I feel like we have a lot of elevated conversations that I get to be a part of, or I get to listen to because of the individuals that we interact with. But also connecting with James, like just to see what he's about and see his project and get to observe it. Social media is very much, it's a tool, and that could be used for good. It can be used for evil. So yeah, I just happy to be a part of it, and it's been great to connect on these positive notes.
Yeah, I've loved watching people connect on the collective throughout and getting the recommendations from other awesome people to be like, hey man, you should talk to this guy. I'm like, yes, we should, and we get them going now. Speaking of which, James, you should talk to Dave on your podcast. I think he'd be a good one to really dig into his history a little bit, because he's got some interesting stuff to say. Now, I have a thought that I wanted to get across.
We'll see about that.
There you go. So I'm wondering, do you guys, anybody got any thoughts before I dive into my little ramble here? Good to go? Okay, so I was having a chat with a friend of mine a little while ago, and he was saying that negative feelings and perhaps the negative emotions that some of us suffer from don't need to be brought up into the light, and that they perhaps might be better served just being put aside. And I had this whole conversation with like, it's all about getting it out and either coming to grips with it or acceptance or so on and so forth. And we kind of, the conversation carried on into other stuff. Had another conversation with a different friend of mine, who then started talking about perhaps those negative thoughts are actually a good thing. They are part of learning and getting better and developing yourself and getting to a point that you can deal with bigger and harder and more challenging things. And it got me thinking about the story of Sisyphus and the fact that he's rolling a boulder up a hill that eventually he loses track of and it falls down, and he's got to do it over and over and over again for eternity. But isn't that a great allegory for the struggles that we have in life, in that we are striving to get that boulder or get whatever that task is to the top of that hill, and then we, finally just about there, and then something goes off the rails and you got to kind of start from the beginning again. And I just want to get your guys' thoughts on that initial entrance into it in the allegory of Sisyphus and our own struggles. So Eric, you're on top. Gonna start with you.
Yeah, man. I love this. I love mythology, and I love the legends and the stories of lore that we can learn from. And yeah, in the story, it's a punishment, right? He's condemned to do this never-ending task. He gets to the top only to have to repeat it the next day. But I do love the allegory of the grind, because a lot of what this group is about and the individuals within it, everyone that comes on is like, you're never done. And to think that you are, like, it's so shallow, right? To be about like one goal and then you check it off. And you do see these in like high performing people that they build a startup and then they sell it for a fortune, and then they feel this emptiness right afterwards, right? Or someone reaches that gold medal of an Olympic endeavor, and then oftentimes it's followed by depression. And it is that recognition that like we have to keep grinding and keep growing, and failure and mistakes are very much a part of that.
I like that. Dave, thoughts?
So like, I like the analogy, whatever it is, the story, the mythology story. But I think so a couple things came to mind. First of all, a long time ago, I stopped using positive and negative when it comes to thoughts, and switched to effective and ineffective. Because like the individual thoughts, at least for me, are so individual, right? And so for me to tell somebody what to think or to label their thought process as positive or negative is kind of outside of my comfort zone. And I don't think I have the right to do that. And so I always ask, how's it working for you? Like, that's kind of the big question. And if it's working well, and like really working well, not just working well to get you through this, this little thing, but in the long run, it's destroying you. But if it's working well and you're still getting better, you're still progressing along the lines you want, I like effective versus ineffective. As far as the, and it's perfect that it's James's anniversary, because I love this analogy too. And when we're talking about, like you said, we get to the top of the hill, you're almost there, and then you have to start all over again. And I think a huge amount of friction comes from when we mislabel our lives or as like open versus closed. Like, this is going to be a closed skill. Like, I'm going to build this business, I'm going to get to the top, and someday I'm going to arrive. Or like fitness, I'm going to work out really hard, I'm going to eat well, and one day I'm just going to get there, and it'll be easy, right? That obviously we know is not true, right? So we're setting ourselves up for a massive, massive failure. And so in fitness, and especially in marriage especially, right? Like marriage, you don't win at marriage. Like, you'll never win at marriage. Winning at marriage is staying married today, right? Like, if I stay married today, at the end of the day, I'm still married. Like, that's a win for me. And I have to do the exact same or more stuff tomorrow so that I can stay married tomorrow. Like, I don't come to the end of marriage. Like, I didn't win marriage. Like, it's not over, right? And so that's because it's like an open skill where like things change. You don't know the players. There's no rules. There's no time limit. There's some rules, but they change as you go. Whereas if it's a closed skill, right? Like a rugby game, where that the time's going to end. There's a score. The players, they don't change, right? So that you can kind of understand that there's going to be an end. Someone's going to win or lose at some point when this time runs out, and the time's always going to run out when the time runs out. But when we do when you try to apply that to a skill that's infinite versus finite or closed versus open, there's massive friction because you're just setting yourself up for failure. I guess if that makes sense.
I love it. James, what are you thinking?
For me, when I think of Sisyphus, I guess the way that you visualize it is that he's doing the same thing over again. He never gets anywhere. Whereas I would almost take Milo's story as a kind of parallel mythology. There's always a weight on his back, a calf, and then obviously as it grows. But I think what's missed is that negative emotion, that trauma, that those challenges, however you want to kind of describe things that happen to us and the way that our brain processes them. Each time that you get through that day, each time the boulder gets closer and closer and closer to the top of the hill, or the day that you finally get to put the calf down, you're a little bit stronger than you were yesterday. So I think that negative emotions, I think that trauma, I think that challenges and life struggles can really help forge resilience. They can make you stronger. They truly can, if addressed properly. So for example, if he just gave up at the exact same level a quarter of the way up the hill, he's never really probably going to grow. But if he's just kind of pushing a little bit more, his body is forging, stronger, his bones are getting stronger, his tendons, his muscles, and he's able to push a little bit more. So that's kind of how I see. Again, I like that phrase of not using negative and positive. And one of my guests, Eric Potterat, who was the chief psychologist for the SEALs for about a decade, he doesn't like using the word trauma anymore. I think it was struggles. That was the term he used. And so if you overcome struggles, that negativity you start kind of harnessing, then you use it as fuel for your drive, for your positivity.
Really, I'm taking this. Sean, what are you thinking?
I don't have too much more to add because I kind of got lost in Dave's dreamy narrative there, where I was just like, "Oh, this guy he thinks so uniquely." I love this podcast because the people who show up are not so different-minded than I am that it's puzzling, but they are rich enough intellectually that it challenges me. And so this is what I was thinking as I was listening to everyone. Podcasting is the mountain, and we're all bearing a weight load on our back at time to time. I mean, just looking at the history of the collective, or I'm sure James, you could speak to this, or Eric, you could speak to this. You've got Dave. I don't know if you've got some secret podcast hidden up your sleeve, but I didn't think so. I didn't want to exclude you, though, buddy. I'm very inclusive over here. I think that. In podcasting, we're all climbing up a large mountain from time to time, and sometimes I feel like the weight is more than it is, and sometimes I feel like I can't see the end of the hill. Sometimes I'm tumbling back down it. Sometimes I don't even want to put a foot up the hill. I want to head in the different direction. So, while we're discussing Sisyphus on a podcast, all I'm thinking is the podcast is Sisyphus to some degree. And so I think you can apply the analogy to all things in life, but at the end of the day, none of it really matters, because the dude was climbing up a hill for what? For a reason. The why. And that's what's going to keep him heading up the hill every day of the rest of his life, if that's what is required to achieve his important why. And so why do we do it over here? Well, we've got our whys. Why do we attend podcasts? We've got our whys. But the final piece that I'll build it out to, which is where I was generally heading, is that Sisyphus is an example, and it's more of a ephemeral example. But in the real world, there's many Sisyphus, there's many hills. But I like to think of it now, after this discussion, as a mountain range of Sisyphus. Eric is a mountain, James is a mountain, we're a mountain. There's all these little mountains of podcasts. Everyone's climbing up their little mountains. But if you get up high enough, or if you get 3/4 of the way up the hill, you can see the other mountain. It's like, oh yeah, there's Eric. Whew. I've got someone who's on my flank. If I climb a little bit higher, oh, there's James way off in the distance, big freaking Mount Everest. Whew. I'm glad I know which way I've got to head. And so the higher you climb up, the more Sisyphus moments you see, the more you can create a commonality of the universal struggle of who's positively in the game and who's negatively in the game.
This is going down a road that I didn't expect it to, and I'm loving it. So, Dave, what do you got?
So, and I would just to build on that analogy, the higher you get up the mountain and the less mountains are up there, the less peaks that are up there, right? And so you continue to do that, those peaks that are there, the Jameses, the Erics, they're at a level where you're at. And so you guys can even push yourselves further, where everyone else they quit at the first sign of adversity, or the first level of clouds, or the third level of clouds. And the higher and higher you go, the less and less peaks there are, the less and less people there are. However, they have the most in common with you. And that's what pushes you even further, because now you're looking to your left and your right. Instead of 1,000 people, there's 15 people, or 5 people, or 4 or 3 people. And we know, everyone sitting here, what that means and why we do things when we're on a small team, right? Like how powerful that team is, and the peer pressure, the positive or effective peer pressure, right? Like, I am not going to quit, because if I even let up a second, like, I might be the only thing that's holding this guy next to me going, right? He might be looking at me being, I'm not going to stop, because then he might stop. And so we kind of get that symbiosis, even though we don't know we're not like talking about it, it's just happening. And that's where you just pushes yourself even further.
Yeah, 100%.
I gotta call out the real worldness of it, because James is on here right now. There's podcasts that I've been on where I feel like I haven't put out what I wanted to put out, or I feel like I underperformed, or I feel like I kind of let my podcast host down, and so to your point, Dave, and I'm curious whether it is a common feeling or whether it's a unique feeling, because as Dave described it, and this is how I feel about it, small team mentality, or elite, for lack of a better term, team mentality, I want to redo if I screw up. And by screw up, I mean if I disappoint the other person, or I disappoint me. If I feel like I didn't do what was expected in the moment, I want to redo. I want to, like, not just redo, I want to redo it and then go beyond where I failed in the past, to such a degree that I feel like I set the record straight. And setting the record straight, not for Sean, but setting the record straight on the mission objective, that's what I have been driven by for a long, long time. And so I'm not sure if that's a result of small unit mindsets that tend to form up that way and encourage that sort of mindset. But I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about that in regards to that.
Let's start with James. What do you think?
Using the mountain analogy and finding yourself looking across and seeing some peaks, not many, many peaks. Because I mean, the podcast world is a perfect example. I think I found where this, my one ranks in all of them around the world, and it was millions of podcasts that are out there. And so, as you start rising up, what I realize is that there are less and less people. And I'm not talking about competition in any way, shape, or form. I think the beautiful thing about podcasts is there's one for everyone, no matter what it is you want to learn about, no matter what kind of person you are, what kind of host you want to listen to. But as you keep rising and rising, especially if your why is actually truly trying to make the world a little bit better, it's almost like you find yourself in that small team, Sean. So let's say you're the nonprofit world, and then you rise and you realize, well, some of these nonprofits, a lot of these admin costs are, being eaten up by these donors. And so you rise more, and you find these nonprofits that are, not paying themselves any money, and so as the higher you get, I think the smaller that group becomes. And I find that, whether it's sitting here now in this conversation, or looking at the people that have been on the show, or even, just your address book, you start to find yourself around people whose burning desire is to truly make the world better. This is what I find. So that team becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And you also then have this look, and as you said, not looking down on people, but it's almost like you get a higher perspective what truth is. So whether, the conversation before was masks or no masks, or, all the divisive rhetoric, as you stand at the top and you're talking to these great people that are in the middle wanting to truly make the world better, I find that that's the kind of intersection of the Venn diagram by that point. You're really starting to glean the truth from people, not myself, from experts in their fields who truly have walked the walk. They've been boots in the ground in these places. So that team starts huge, and going to Sean's point, I think the more that you progress, the more it's like a magnet, the more you're drawn to smaller and smaller teams who become your intimate circle. And again, if you've got that servant's heart, if making the world better is truly burning in your soul, you'll look to the left and right, and there'll be like-minded people, just like Eric, just like everyone else, excuse me, on here. So that would be my perspective of the small unit. It's like you're ascending a ladder towards that unit, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Eric, what are you thinking?
Yeah, there is. I love the Venn diagram description because there is this like-mindedness, and then there's this smaller echelon as you interact with people that are of the same mindsets and the same values, and the crossovers there, and then also the same missions, right? Like there's a specific group that only because of experience of podcasting is a separate thing, right? There's a lot of people doing amazing work, and a lot of it's not public, but we're of a circle that's trying to put things out in a positive way. And so with that, it gets lonelier, right? Like there's just not a lot of people in the space. And then you're going to potentially get the trolls down below, but you try not to mind them. So again, with the mountain allegories, it's just recognizing like what is the mission? And it's not necessarily to get to the top, because what does that even look like? Because the top that you look at, there might be another top, or it might be, hey, this isn't even the mountain I need to be on. Maybe I need to get back down to the range and laterally traverse, that chasm, because that's where I want to be. That's where these other dudes are. That's the space that I resonate with and resonates with me. And what are we chasing, right? So we talk about mission. Is it just to build a big podcast? Is it to build a big following, get a lot of downloads, or is it impact, right? Because a lot of times in this circle, in this space, especially first responder military conversations, I love dudes like Mark Bouchard who are just so positive, right? And he's just like, hey man, I wrote a book. I don't know if how many people are going to read it, but I know why I wrote it. And I know it's the book I needed. And of course people are reading it. And of course people have rave reviews because it's a fantastic piece of work from a fantastic individual. But, I'm over here doing this lateral thing. And at the same time, it's not a competition. Like it is a collaboration, right, of the collective. So, I love a lot of this conversation. And I think those are different ways to look at it, because like the mountain allegory that a lot of people think of, it's not just getting to the top, it's enjoying the view, right? It's about the journey. And I think that's where there's a lot of crossovers.
Absolutely. Dave, you got any points to add onto this?
I do. Let me beat this mountain allegory to death, right? So when we're talking about, and it's funny, James, you brought up Dr. Potterat, because I remember Doc P, I used to show some of his clip from the military channel back in like 2007 when we were talking about goal setting, right? And I don't know if it's changed, his method has changed or not. Mine certainly has, right? And so in sports psychology, the goal setting, it used to be, you get 7 steps of goal setting. And the first 5 steps, you ain't doing nothing, right? You're just writing down on a piece of paper. You're setting these big, hairy, audacious goals and breaking them down and doing all this sort of stuff, right? And then you go out and actually start your little action steps. That's great, right? So when we're on that mountain, we're climbing that mountain and we have a clear view and we can see clearly in front of us, there's a ridge. That's my goal, is to get to that ridge. I can do that, right? Then I get to that ridge. Okay, there's another one. I can get to that ridge. And you break it down in these short steps, right? Now, imagine that entire mountain is filled with fog and you're in the clouds the entire time, right? And so all you're doing is taking a step after step after step forever. So this goes back to Milo. This goes back to Sisyphus. This goes back to whatever. And all you got to do is keep stepping. Now, it's really, 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 really hard to find motivation from things you haven't done yet. I'm going to get to that ridge. I can do that. Well, I can't even see the friggin' ridge, right? So where's that motivation come? And that's where most people lose that motivation. And that's why, that internal drive of like, I just got to look in front of me, take one step at a time and live in that moment forever, as long as it takes, right? So I don't know if this is a closed skill or an open skill. All I know is if I take a step, I'm going to move forward. I don't know how long it's going to take me. I don't know where it's going to take me. I don't know what, but I know I'm going up and I know I'm going forward, and it's something that I can do every day. And so when you need motivation, instead of looking forward, you look back and think, okay, where I've come from or how many steps you've done, right? So I've already done 8 million steps. I'm going to keep going. Like, I'm not going to, that's going to be my motivation, as opposed to I'm going to get to that thing way up there. And then eventually, when you do come out, because you don't know where you're going to come out of the clouds, when you do come out, if you just do that and focus on there, it could take 5 years, it could take 10, who knows? But that's where you'll find that, especially, I bet, the more the clouds, like the collective, you guys did a podcast every day for 365 days live. Sean, you also did your live. Like, you guys were head down, eyes forward in a freaking cloud, right? And then, you came out, and maybe you still only had a couple thousand followers or whatever. But tomorrow, when you come out, you're going to be the only ones who have, like, or very, very few who have that dedication to go live twice a freaking day for 365 days, right? And so at some point, you're going to realize, holy, like crap, there's nobody around here on this mountain, or very, very, very few, right? And so I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yep, I'm tracking. Sean, what are you thinking on this?
It does make sense to me. And to your point, Dave, for that full year while we were freaking wandering around in the fog, every time I wanted to plant a flag in the fog, I was usually ramming it in my own foot. So, you've got that.
Exactly.
And the flag aspect is kind of an important piece. And that's why I'm bringing up a sense of humor in it, because I find that maybe the biggest wrong move anyone can make is establishing their self-worth on planting the flag at the top of Mount Podcast, where you're the man, where you get to own the highest flag right on top of Mount Podcast. And so the goal is not to be the man. The goal is to help other men, as it were, our mankind. And so if by your workload capacity or your outcome of help gets to such a degree where it's now called a flag, well, that's the flag on top of Mount Podcast. But until then, as a selfish pursuit of becoming the best podcaster in the world, that to me is not flag worthy. Put away your flag and then walk around in the fog for a little while until you figure out flags aren't important.
Got to get lost a little while before you can get found, right? That's the old adage. And I think it's interesting because I'm going to bring this back to Sisyphus here and get your guys' thoughts on this. But so the whole thing about rolling a stone up the hill is a great allegory to a lot of things in life. But the reason why he was there was that it was a punishment for thinking that he was more clever than the gods. So in my mind, the way I at least interpret that is that he questioned the establishment and was punished for it. And by questioning that establishment of whatever, the gods or society or whatever, he then had to go through this continual struggle. And I think that happens in life as well, especially with podcasting, right? When you first start something new, you're questioning your capability, you're questioning whether or not you should be there, you're questioning your life right now, and you're trying to enter into something new. And then you have to deal with those struggles consistently every day. You wake up and you got to push that hill up the mountain. And Dave, you said this perfectly earlier, was marriage is, there's no winning that, right? You wake up in the morning and you're going to push that marriage hill up the mountain, or push that marriage boulder up the mountain. And then you're going to go to sleep and you're going to wake up and you're going to do it all over again. And you're just going to keep doing that with no end in sight. But I want to get your guys' thought on, do you guys really see what I'm going with this, where the questioning of your current circumstances begins that task?
Yeah, man.
Makes sense. Eric, go for it. You're up.
Yeah. So what this strikes for me is, again, I love the story. I don't know if I published it, but I wrote a blog about it, so it might be just on my drive somewhere. But about this whole thing, right? It's a punishment, but then the flip was, as we've all discussed, like how that can be a positive, how you can find the merit and the resilience in this story. But to me, what this sings out, as you just described it, is the recognition that as you learn, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know shit, right? Like you don't know what you don't know, and you keep finding it. And so you keep expanding this universe. And so as you become more potentially a legitimate professional, more potentially an expert to the outside, those that are humble, those that are all about the grind, recognize that you're simply a novice, like you are just unawares, right? And so in that, I think it ties directly in with all these notions of framing, right? The very beginning prompt that you gave Chance was, hey, do you focus on the negative, or do you essentially shuttle it away, compartmentalize it? And I think that's context dependent, and there's a right and wrong way, and there's a balance that's going to be different for everyone, right? For a lot of people, you recognize it, you process it, you metabolize it, and you move the heck on. For other people, they shuttle it away and it's going to start festering. But yeah, we don't want to dwell. And it's even as Dr. Dave said, hey, like there's negative, positive, a different flip, a different mindset and framing is this effective or ineffective, right? Is this useful or not? And you want to be like Bruce Lee, you want to be nimble and be like water, right? Like absorb what is helpful and then abandon what's not. And so, man, I know that I'm kind of spiderwebbing different ways, but that's where my brain's going, is that there's so many different ways you can unpack this. And so much I think is about mindset, and that ties directly in with gratitude. As you were describing the prompt, I think about this daily grind, right? The header on the screen, every moment, do your best every day. And is that not living your best life? And if you're thinking like your best life and you close your eyes and you visualize it and it's not where you're at right now, there's little things that you could do daily, right? With your relationship, with your marriage, with your partnerships. There's little things where you can just exist in the now and be super humble and grateful in the expanse of it, and just do what you can tangibly do. And if you do that appropriately and effectively, you will probably have the best life. Maybe not this moment, but later today and tomorrow and the next week.
I really like that. James, what are you thinking?
I'm going to change up the whole thought process completely, because the moment you talked about challenging the establishment, you got all my juices flowing. So what if on the other side of the peak of the mountain, the boulder would roll down and destroy the establishment? So actually that's his motivation, that he was challenged by corrupt governments, pharmaceutical companies, fast food manufacturers. And that was basically it, that it wasn't so much that it was a punishment, that he knew that just standing up to these people and getting such immense opposition because it wasn't the right thing to be talking about, that if he could just keep going and get a little bit stronger every day, that one day there would be a critical mass and he would actually be part of the change that would benefit the world. That's my thought.
I'm liking where this is going. Dave, what do you think?
So super deep. And the way I look at that is, when we're talking about rebellion, right? Like my own personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion, right? Whatever I can do to not take their money, to not eat their food, to not watch their TV, to not follow their illogical rules or whatever I can do. And the goal is not to be disobedient. The goal is to become excellent, right? So I introed myself talking about my daughter. And so, I don't have a lot of talent to pass along to her. I am not musical. Thank God she got her mom's look, because I'm not good looking. I'm not particularly smart, but what I can do is work really, really hard for a really, really long time. And so my goal, like what I can pass on to her, is a work ethic, and not me telling her what to do, but she knows from the day she was born that she can come, when she wakes up at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m, she can come out to the gym, and daddy's been there since 4 a.m. for 6-7 years. Like, she knows that's what I do. And she knows about that work ethic. And so like I am instilling that through her, because she sees that in me every day. And like, to me, that's the best gift that I can give her. And, I give her that gift, and maybe somebody else, like there's 3 or 4 neighbors that I see, we're in the 5 a.m. club, right? And I see them running around, and other neighbors who see me later, they so maybe somehow, some way, I'm affecting change in a much smaller, less dramatic way. And I hope that establishment, and I say that, and I'm somewhat disillusioned, because like I was there for a long time trying to change the masses, and and God bless you, James, because like it beat me down, and I just, what I said, I'm not interested in changing the masses anymore. Like, my family is my number one priority, and I'm going to do everything I can and focus all my energy on that, right? And if anyone wants to come around with me, that's great. But like, I don't really like, my politics is leave me the heck alone, I guess.
I like it. Sean, what are you thinking on this?
A few things. So if Sisyphus if he's in the daily habit of pushing a boulder up a hill because he's being punished. I feel like I had a taste of that action when I was a young buck in the military because you know, the mountain, as it were, was frickin' potatoes. Peel those potatoes, boy. I've peeled a lot of potatoes in my life because I've pushed back a lot because I like to think outside of the box and I like to question the system. Whatever's in front of me, whatever construct is in front of me, I'm like sometimes the biggest problem the construct has got because I'm not satisfied with average answers. And I like to think differently. And I can't even help it. Whether I like to or not, I just do. And I think that's what makes that is perhaps one of the characteristics of special operators is that they tend to think outside of the box, and I'll leave it loosely as that. And I'm not saying that I'm the biggest out of the box thinker in the world, but I'm a big enough out of the box thinker that my world is out of the box thinking. That's just how I view the world. Everything is out of the box concepts to me. If I'm unhappy with what's in front of me, I'm trying to reverse engineer it, but in a way that is so novel that it freaks me out. And if I throw it in the garbage because it's a crap idea, then so be it. But I love pushing the envelope in my own mind and then playing with it out in the world to see if it breaks. That's just who I am. And so if I was Sisyphus in the military pushing potatoes up the mountain, well, I got good at it. And I got good enough at it that I started saying to myself, well, freaking big deal. It's just potatoes. Whatever. The sergeant major doesn't like me. Big deal. I'm still smashing on my job and come and keep up with me, pal. That's what used to run through my head. And so that's it. However I was wired as I went through my military career, I simply got used to the idea that I think a bit differently. You can throw all the punishments at me in the world at me, but as the 24 cycle unfolds, every single day, I'm showing up and kicking ass. And eventually it all sorted itself out. Eventually I got my act together and eventually my out of the box thinking was useful. But now, as we're having this conversation, I'm left with this thought. So, Sisyphus may have been the most privileged man in all analogies, or because, I mean, he was handed a situation that was quote unquote a punishment, but the punishment was a gift. At least it was a gift for a dude like me. I mean, if the gods are throwing that as a punishment at me, well, thank you. Because when I was a young buck, I didn't know what to do. I needed some God punishment, perhaps. And so give me the rock. I'll keep pushing until I get my act together. And so Sisyphus was a lucky dude. He got used to the adversity. He got comfortable in pushing the rock. And eventually, maybe his end state, as he was pushing it up day after day after day, he came to the realization that the top of the mountain isn't the top of the mountain. It's pushing it down the other side to break the institution, as James referred to. And so, man, I'll be Sisyphus all day long if it leads to a better Sean and a better world.
Bam. I like that. I'm going to go around again. Eric, got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, on that, I wonder how much that is disposition, right? And I wonder how much young Sean, he got his bag of potatoes and his bucket and his peeler, and he's not quitting, right? Like, it's not like, okay, this means shut your mouth. No, this means I'm bucking the trend and I'm reflecting and I'm learning and I'm growing. I wonder how much that kind of thing is empowering to others that are like, oh, look at Sean doing his thing. He stood up to the man, or what have you, right? In James's example, I mean, you could be pushing it up to roll it over the other side, but if not, you have to recognize that if you're doing things for the right reasons on conviction of your values, then you're going to keep pushing. You're not going to sit at the bottom and be resigned to your fate and to your punishment. You're like, no, if my fate is to push this, like, I'm going to do it because I need to, and I'm going to do it because people are watching and people are noticing, and that's empowering, right? Like, these stories of a rebellion, like Cool Hand Luke, like, he's going to eat all those eggs or he's going to do what he does. And there's power in that, right? There's power in recognizing the agency. And again, that's mindset, because we know a lot of individuals that we've known through our lives and organizations that they get the the slap on the wrist and they shut down. They're done. But for others, they recognize like, hey, you've challenged the boss or the system or the institution or what have you, the old guard, and it's actually a motivator that you're on the right track to developing yourself and being a leader, because leadership doesn't happen, just in the books. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like, it happens in adversity, and that's leadership of a group. That's leadership of yourself.
Bam. That's a mic drop moment right there. Dave, you got any points to add on this?
I'm glad you said that, Sean, because like I got the stories confused. And James, thank you for bringing up Milo, because that's what I was thinking of. And so when you first talked about Sisyphus and you talked about him rolling the stone up the hill, my first thought was, that's amazing. Like that, if that's all I had to worry about, right? Like you said, Sean. And let me ask you this: does Sisyphus get injured? Is he injury free? Because if he's injury free and he doesn't have to ever worry about injury, like that's the best life. And so, I think it's a shadow strength that I have too, like meaning it can go negative, right? So, when I was at, and this kind of goes to my mindset, when I was at selection for all those years, like I would always ask guys, why are you here, right? And I didn't find a right or wrong answer, right? Like, it's not like this guy said this, then he's definitely going to make it, or this guy says this, he's not going to make it. But the ones that I always paid more attention to, because, some guys are like, oh, country, this is I wanted the best missions, I want to have the best gear, whatever. Cool, all good answers. But it was the dudes who said, man, I just want to see if I can do it, right? Like that to me, I know that they're internally motivated and they're interested in like, what's next, right? Like, what's the next thing? And usually for a lot of them, by the time they get to where I was, they either haven't failed much or they failed and overcame, right? And so now they're looking for the next thing, right? And they're kind of looking for that failure. Like, where is my failure point? Because this thing was supposed to be really, really hard and no one's supposed to make it. And I did. And honestly, like that can't be it, right? So what's next? And so, when I think of that as being a punishment forever, like that to me is like, I would say that would be almost heaven for me. Like no worries. And I love my family. I love all that stuff, but like, I don't know how to handle that. That's stressful, right? There's so much stress and like, I'm not very good at that, or it's complicated. And there's a lot of stuff. But if I have a system where I just have to push this rock up the hill and then start again, like I know tomorrow I'm going to get a little bit bigger, stronger, faster. And I'm constantly for the rest of my life trying to figure out a system to get a PR the next day, right? The next day. Now, what sucks about getting a PR is like, oh, now I have to do it tomorrow. Like, right? So there's that negative, but like, to me, that's heaven. Now, the negative part I say is that like, it's really easy to get so internal and care about my own personal development that like the rest of the stuff falls to the wayside, and that's no good, right? Because I don't exist by myself for eternity, if that makes sense. But when you first said it, like to me, like that, I could do that. I feel like.
You're looking for a job right now? Like, yeah, let's do that right now. James, what are you thinking on this?
When you talk about the rock being punishment, that really kind of puts a kind of analogy in my mind about the why. And again, I think if you look at selection, if you look at fire academies, police academies, whatever it is, the people who make it, ultimately the common denominator is they have a burning why, because you're asking someone to go through suffering, and whether it's some sort of military hell week, or whether it's this being in bunker gear for hours in the South Florida sun, if your why isn't strong, you're going to tap out. But if you have that why, that shared suffering forges that incredible brotherhood and sisterhood that we see in our professions. But analogy to me would be, if you think about the chain gangs, I think that one Arizona prison governor, he had all the addicts out there breaking rocks in the sun because, that's going to fix addiction. Their why, I'm sure, wasn't very strong. But now put that same group of people with hand tools in West Virginia or Africa after a mine collapses. Same work, the different why. They're probably going to work a damn sight harder. They're going to work till they drop. So I think that why is really important. If you're told to do something for the punishment and that's it, that's a very different conversation than hypothetically, if you can get this boulder over to the top, you're now going to be able to change things for everyone else when you drop it into that big building at the bottom. So just to kind of slide, that's the only thing that going to resonate that hasn't been discussed yet really was suffering is so important. I think that's why, we struggle at the moment, because our lives are so easy with AC and cars and drive-throughs and all these things. But that struggle has to be backed by a real desire to do it. And then ultimately, if you can do it with a group, that shared suffering is, I think it's something that few will ever understand. But if you've been in uniform, I think we get a much better glimpse into it.
Yeah. Dave, what do you got?
So
I love it.
try not to talk too much, but that brings up a point. And so, the why is definitely important. But what we found, so at selection, we're really good, and I pride myself particularly as being really good at creating situations where you run out of yourself, right? You're going to run out of yourself. And what I mean is, like, everything you've ever done, everything you've ever used to keep yourself motivated, like, we're going to develop a situation or put you in a situation where you're going to run out of that, right? And so, like, you're going to have nothing left. So you're going to be at a point where I've never been here before. What do I do, right? And so the why is important, but and this is the genius of it. We try to create those situations when you're by yourself, right? So when you're at the group, there's power in the group, but we separate you. That's where we have the power to really to find out what's inside of you, right? So the why is important. However, it's if you tie the why to a broader purpose, right? So the why you're at selection, the why you're trying to go through this, I want to see if I can do it. But what is your broader purpose that you've thought about and developed and tied to that why, right? And so this goes to that broader conversation of, like, here's my, I have a creed. We have a Riccuti family creed, but, like, my creed is specifically geared towards my family, right? And so, like, I mean, it's borrowed from the Navy, but, like, my family expects me to be physically stronger and mentally tougher than any opposition will face, and I live up to that standard, right? And so, like, that is my purpose in life. So everything I do, the why is to reinforce that purpose of never being in a situation where my family is let down because of I didn't work hard enough, because I'm not mentally stronger than the person I'm facing or the enemy I'm facing. And so that purpose drives me. And so when I'm going through the why of, like, some awful situation that is, whatever, cool. But then when it's really hard, and it's very hard, I find, for me anyways, it's very hard for me to create those situations. I do my best, but it's hard for me to create those situations where I run out of myself for myself, right? It has to be something, because we don't want to do that, I guess. And so maybe I game the system somewhere internally, and I don't allow myself to create that situation, even though I try to put myself through it, but some way I build in a back door, I guess. So sometimes the why is enough to get through. But, when life throws those things at you that you just beat you down continuously, and you have to go down to the bottom of the mountain and restart all over again, right? Then that's where the purpose, along with the why, becomes absolutely crucial.
Love that. Sean, thoughts on this?
I do. And so, Dave, before you just said what you said, I was expecting for the table to go in its sequential order. So I already had my idea in mind just before you jumped in. But it just so happens that what you just said completely reinforces what I was going to present as the idea. So now you've got to put on your imagination hat, anyone who's listening. And what I'd like you to do is just imagine a sunny meadow, just a nice meadow surrounded by a tree line. Maybe it's 300-400 meters wide, nice sunny meadow, green grass, and there's a rock in the middle of that meadow. So I want you to capture that image in your mind right now. See the rock and you, and there's no one else in that meadow. There's no one for 1,000 miles. It's just you in that meadow. And by the way, it's you, that rock, and that meadow for the rest of your life. No other distractions. I was trying to formulate this similar to selection, where you have to know your why, and it's a very independent game. You have to own your moment all by yourself. The decisions that you make, your weaknesses, your strengths, your flaws, and all of that good stuff. And so with you and the rock, there's no other distractions. And here's what happens with some people. They'll sit next to that rock for a few days and then get bored and then start clambering on it. They'll jump off it, they'll climb back on it, they'll jump off it, they'll climb back on it, they'll put their shoulder into it, give it a little nudge. And you know, if that rock, think back to that rock now, that rock that you had in your mind when you visualized it, did you see a massive freaking rock? Or did you see a rock that is just about knee high? Because it's indicative of everybody's mindset. It's indicative of how people think. If you instantly create the rock in the middle of a meadow and you saw a huge freaking boulder, well, now that you've seen it, it's your job to play with it. But if you saw a knee-high boulder, it's your job to play with it. For the rest of your life, that is life. It's the world in front of you that you get to play with. If it's a huge freaking rock, well, it's clamber time, baby. And if it's a chest-high rock, it's shoulder into it, baby. And if it's a knee-high rock, you're going to try to kick it around, stub your toe a few times, but eventually you'll gamify that meadow moment. And here's why you'll do it. Because you've got no other distractions. It's just you and the rock. That's it. That's all. And a person who's engaged in life will find a way to engage with life. The rock is the life. That's it. That's all. Now, why do people struggle to engage with the rock? Why do people struggle to engage with the gamifying the problem or the opportunity? It's because of the distractions. At the edge of the meadow, there's the internet, there's the phone, there's the thing, there's the mall, there's the fast food, there's the TV, there's the politics, there's the mask, there's the everything. But if we could just take a single person, slap them into the middle of a meadow with the rock of their choosing, they could spend the rest of their days there, finding a way to find a good life, finding a challenging life, a life full of learning. That's, I feel, where things have gone wrong. We're not looking at the rock. We're looking at fast food. We're not looking at the rock. We're looking at TV and etc. So that's a thought that came up into my mind just before Dave came in with pretty much almost an identical concept as to who you are and how you work in life.
I'm going to postulate something on this, and I really like where we're going with this, and that the rock in the meadow is such a great analogy, and I think that rock can be anything we want it to be, right? And I got this image as you were talking about. There's actually a field in my my family's ranch with just one big rock in it. It's a big green field. It's a perfect image in my head. But that a lot of people for many years, that rock was family or community, or it was another sort of tribal system that kept them almost tied to the rock. Not quite tied to the rock, but there's a certain proximity that you kind of maintain to it because that's what your life centered around. And I think that at least in regards to these struggles where you start to play with it, you start to gamify life, and you start to enjoy just messing around with that rock. I look at my uncle as an example, who's lived his whole life on the ranch down southern Alberta, raising cows. Now, he can do stuff during the day, right? He can go play hockey, he can go for a ride, he can do stuff, but his daily life is tethered to that ranch. He can't take off for weeks at a time. He can't go travel the world right now because he's got cows to feed and he's got jobs to do and he's got someone. But it becomes, there's distractions in the moment, but that rock is still the anchor that maintains his life, right? It is the thing that holds him and grounds him, centers him to away from the rest of the distractions. Whereas I think people that live in not just cities, but when you have all of the distractions of life, instead of a central pillar that you can always go back to, that stone in the meadow, you're left wandering the wilderness trying to figure out, like, oh, what do I tie myself to? And then it becomes your job, it becomes your personality, it becomes shopping or having the right bag or having the right car or whatever, and you start to lose the tie. You start to lose the memory of what that meadow was like. And I'm again postulating. What do you guys think on this? James, I'm going to hit you first because I saw you writing notes. What do you got?
um, I was thinking about my first wife's grandmother, who wasn't born in this town, but she's lived in a small town in Florida and has always just been so content. And I think when you look back to generations prior to now, no one was telling the farmer, the blacksmith, the butcher, the baker, "Oh, you don't have enough. You need to have a chain. You need a franchise of butcher shops, and you need to have a Fitbit and, a coffee cup that keeps your coffee warm and all this stuff." So it's interesting. I think one of the things that really anchors people to farms, to small towns, to these places where people genuinely seem happy is they just never bought into being told that it wasn't enough. And I think that's the problem now is we're on a treadmill. A lot of people are constantly chasing that thing, but they're not moving forward an inch because it's never enough. I mean, I came from the UK in 2002, and by the time I became a firefighter and was working in Anaheim, California, my friends were, I mean, this is at the height right before the real estate crash. They were paying $500,000-$600,000 for like an 800 square foot home in Southern California. They had Winnebagos, they had dirt bikes, they had jet skis, and I was like, this does not seem to be the American dream that I was thinking of, And I grew up on a farm, so I kind of romanticized about the bit of land and chickens and cows and a dog and all that kind of stuff. And I think this is the issue: is we need to go back to the rock. I think we've gone too far from the rock, where we're just chasing specters. We're chasing things that were never there in the first place, and we've completely lost our way from the amount of movement that we should have every day, to the quality of our food, to the time in daylight, to the quality of our sleep. And now we've got biohacks and wearables and all this stuff that really is just another distraction, another way of pulling money from families, that if you just reverse engineer to pretty much how most people lived 100, 150 years ago, that is going to be 80, 90% of our true north. So I think your next t-shirt should say, "Find the rock."
Ooh, find the rock. I like that. Eric, what are you thinking on this?
Yeah, man. You're describing the rock and the parallel conversations of the why, and the beauty of the why is that we get to define that. Like no one gets to define that for us, and we can have these meandering thoughts, and we can have the ups and downs of when our why is stronger, when it's weaker, but we get to revisit that, we get to reorient that. And even in the things that distract us from the rock, which can be very important whys, right? When we think about ego or super ego, or like the bigger ideals that we want to be about, and we get to return back to that. And when you're describing the rock in the field, I wonder how much, as you describe this rock, you get to climb on, jump off of, play with, right? You get to do, goblet squats with it if it's little. You get to, find the handholds if it's big. I wonder how many people truly that probably aren't listening to this. They're stuck in their ruts, way away from the rock. But if you introduce that concept and that imagery, I wonder how many people would see it as a burden. Like the rock is a burden, and man, I got this perfect field. It's all manicured. It's all the same. I got to break down this rock, or I got to dig a hole and bury it. And they're looking at it like this obligation or this inconvenience, whereas it's just a rock, right? You get to do with it what you want. Did you visualize something with a ledge, which is like shelter and protection? Did you visualize this flat top where you can lay on it so comfortably in the sun? And I think that as you said, as you visualize it, it tells you a lot about you. And I think that's true. Like, I think it's, again, tying it back to outlook. I think all these conversations where I keep going back to is mindset. We get to determine that. We get to choose that by virtue of our day-to-day, by virtue of our routines that play directly into our goals, our why, our community, what our real purpose is.
Absolutely. Dave, what do you think on this?
I'll be brief. I just think that I agree with everything everyone said. I think the where is a vital step, and I think most of us have gone through it. Certainly, I would imagine in the military, you've gone through something like this. I know the firefighters have the same thing. Police definitely have the same thing, and it's what I think is the first step. Is I talked about that creed. The younger the sooner you can develop your own personal creed, right? And like spend time actually figuring out, because, for young people, right? The hardest thing for young people to do is to say without doubt, fear, worry, this is who I am and this is this is what I believe, right? And truly mean it and know it's them, not their coaches, not their parents, not their preachers, not social media, not their teachers, not anyone else but them, right? And in order to do that, and Chance, you said something about this, right? Like, I say to define, we talked about this, I think, on instant message or DMs, is that like to find peace, you have to go through war with yourself, right? And so going through that process of defining like these are my key core characteristics, and this is what that means and looks like in action, right? And so then that's the answer to any question that you'll ever have. That's the purpose, right? And of course it'll change as you go through life, or at least it may shift. But if you're able to say without doubt, reservation, or fear, this is who I am and this is what I believe, then you're so far ahead of the game. It's unbelievable.
100%. Sean, where are you coming from on this?
I'm going to steal Dave's line. I'm going to try to keep it brief myself as well. And so, to use your relative as the example on the farm, I'm just going to propose this and then see if anyone's got any further thoughts on it. He's out on his farm, and that farm is his rock. But is the rock his grounded rock, or is it a rock around his neck? Because there's two ways to live life. There is the routine of discipline. That means every day he gets up, he feeds the freaking cows, he does his thing, he whatever, rides his horse, stuff. That's his day to day, forever. That could be a rock around his neck if every day he isn't seeing the day for what it can be. He's just seeing the day as it was yesterday. Get up, feed the freaking chickens, then I make myself a bacon sandwich, then I ride my freaking horse because I got to go fix the freaking fence and blah, blah, blah. The day after day grind of a farm can become the routine of discipline that you get lost in. Day after day is Groundhog Day versus the pursuit of excellence or the pursuit of more on that farm. Every minute, he's looking to see something new. He's not just counting his chickens. He's not just looking at the health of his chickens, but he's looking just outside the chicken coop to see a frickin' dandelion or whatever. A new variable, new input, new bandwidth, new life in the day of his life that could either be a rock hanging around his neck or the rock that keeps him grounded.
This fantastic point, and I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit because I think I've told the story before last year at some point, but at one point I was standing in his living room and I was staring out this big bay window that he's got, and it looks over the Old Man River Valley. It's absolutely gorgeous. Sean, you know this area. It's got the Highway 22, and then you got the Rocky Mountains, and it's majestic. And that's his living room view. And I was just standing there staring at it going like, amazed at the marvel that was in front of me. And he came and stood up beside me. He's like, "What you looking at?" And I was like, "The mountains." And he's like, "Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I kind of forgot they were there." Because it is his everyday. Because it was so rote. It's not that he didn't appreciate them. It's just that he saw them every day. He'd wake up in the morning, beautiful sunrise, awesome, cool. Now I'm gonna go to work. And it's really easy to get lost, as you said, Sean, in the discipline of the routine. But to take the time to really appreciate what is there, not just for the sake that it's there, but because you are a part of it. You get to be a piece of that. And one of the reasons why I love going hunting down there is because at sunset, I get to watch the sun set over the Rocky Mountains and watch the shadows go really long from the mountains, and just you get to be a part of that one piece of natural majesty. And that's why I love it. But I really, to your point, Sean, it is really easy to fall into that trap. And let's see if anybody's got any tips to get out of it. James, what are you thinking?
when I heard you talking and the difference between your perspective and your uncle's at that point, and this isn't exactly underlining what I'm about to say, but it reminded me of the phrase familiarity breeds contempt. And I think that the reason that we find ourselves not in that example, he's just literally used to, that majesty he lives amongst, that's his norm, that's his baseline. But I think the reason why a lot of us forget to look around, forget to take a breath and remind ourselves that we are luckier than people that live in the slums of the Philippines or smog in India, and we can take a deep breath, or people with emphysema that can't take a deep breath. I think we've lost a lot of gratitude. I want to, rather than answer this, I want to put this back on you, all of you guys. How does an individual take a moment and be reminded of gratitude, especially as we sit in two countries at the moment that arguably are some of the most fortunate when you compare them to some of the more desperate nations in the world?
That is an excellent question. Eric, what do you think?
I think you had to be humble. You had to think about, you had to care about people. And if you care about people, you empathize and you look at how other people live, right? And you're just talking with James relatively recently about my gratitude of being born in this Western hemisphere and these industrialized countries and what it's afforded me and my family. Like, my grandparents grew up very well off, like in China, but the communists took over in the 50s and then their life was thrown upside down. And then they fled to Taiwan, right? Because they valued freedom and their lives. And when you look at it like that, and you look at it like how so many people in political turmoil and government takeovers and all these things that happen in so many countries, so many places in the world, like it's hard not to be grateful. And you look at just the flip of, I mean, there's so much overlap in this whole conversation, right? You're punished to push a rock up a hill, or you're grateful because of what suffering is able to teach you, and you're grateful that without suffering you can't have pleasure, right? And you can count your chickens and look at every chicken as an obligation that you have to check on the health, or it's going to infect the other chickens. Or you can recognize every chicken has brought life to you and your family, brought livelihood to you and your family, right? So um, I think it's looking at other people and looking at recognizing that no matter how dismal things are, the fact that you're able to reflect on it for a second is some level of privilege, right? Some level of having somethingness that you can step on and you can step off of and improve your situation, right? Step up from.
Beautiful. Dave, what are you thinking on this?
So I think it's hard to answer collectively, right? Like this is it. So for me personally, just being around the things that we've been around, like all of us, the things that we've seen, everyone sitting here, what you've seen, where you've been, and how often and for how long you've been there in those situations, right? Whether it's in other countries, whether it's war, whether it's a fire, whether it's the slums of Seattle, like the whatever. And you come back here and there's just the constant reminder of like this, how great everything is here, right? So I don't feel like I need to be reminded of that. Like I don't need to look at these bracelets, right? And remember they're there and I wear them for a reason, but I don't know that I need them to remind me, right? So, but let's say for everyday average somebody, and we hear this all the time, they have a friend who just got in a car accident, or their friend's husband had a heart attack and he's gone. And then they're like, oh, it makes you have to remember that this can go away anytime. And something like that bad has to happen for them to try to remember. And they remember for about 15 minutes, right? So it's figuring out a way, I guess, to just, a system, I guess. It goes back to the system, right? Having a system in place where you tie brushing your teeth to your gratitude, right? So you have those cues, just like for everything else, right? I guess that's probably the most effective way, but just to purposefully schedule a system of gratitude until it becomes, a little bit more of a habit.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, what are you thinking on this?
I agree with Dave. I think everyone here is being given more than ample reminders of how we should be grateful for where we're at in life. in respect to other countries, other people, other circumstances. And so we've all been given lots of examples. The one example that pops into my head that, I don't know, 6 or 7 times out of 10 pops into my head when I think of the word how to be grateful, or the definition of how fortunate I am. I'm reminded of just a simple moment driving down this out in the middle of nowheresville dirt road in Pakistan. And as I looked out the window to my left flank, there was 3 very large farmers' fields that were connected. As we drove past the first field, I looked to the left and I saw this dude was in the hurt locker. He was skinny as skinny could be, did not look like he was too healthy. He had the traces hanging over top of him, and he was pulling the plow through this farmer's field, and it was an old school plow. And so he was the mule, or he was the water buffalo in this instance. And I mean, like, it wasn't quite a caricature, but it was almost a poster of frickin' rock around the neck on this situation. The next field was another rough-looking skinny guy that now had the plow, the 2 steering arms of the plow, but this one was being pulled by a water buffalo. And then the field beyond that was a plow that was connected to a janky old tractor. And so in 3 fields, I saw about 3,000 years of history. And I saw 3 humans, 3 men, all working maybe as hard as each other to some degree, but in 3 very different circumstances. That mind view that I have locked in my mind's eye is always a great example of how fortunate we all are. And I think we all need reminders stashed away in our mind space of how lucky we are. But what to do with that? I mean, I can't change the circumstances over there to enough of the degree that I feel like that's where my focus is going to be. My best focus for Sean is on Sean and how to improve his immediate world for those around me that I can tangibly impact. So it's good to have ideas. It's good for Sean to have ideas of what's tough and what isn't tough in respect to personal circumstances. So that helps give me gratitude. But my wife says from time to time the quaint saying of have an attitude of gratitude. And she kind of beat that into me for a number of years because I probably didn't have an attitude of gratitude. I was just used to doing my thing rather than thinking about the greater footprint around me. And over the last 3-4 years, I suppose, as I've started to think more globally, um, I I find it much easier to achieve gratitude for not only this moment right now. I just finished freaking drinking an amazing Colombian Frank Torres Couture wash that I roasted about 6 days ago, and it was like world class. Now I'm on a glass of BioSteel hydration mix that I'm drinking so that at the end of this podcast, I can go smash out a mountain bike ride in my little hobbit town. I'm talking to great dudes. Some point today, I'll be talking to other great people. And by the end of the day, I'll feel like I've lived an amazing day life. And so I'm lucky. We're all lucky. But we only know we're lucky if we check our mindset with how we start our sentences. And I'm going to make it super simple. If in my mind I start a sentence as such, oh no, I've got a podcast to do today. That is an entirely different thing than, oh yeah, right, I've got a podcast today. 2 different mindsets that you can check in with your mindset based on how you start your sentences in your mind. Oh yeah, I'm going to get to rib on Eric and James about their podcast before we go live. I'm looking forward to that. So how you set up your day in your mindset is oh yes or oh no.
I like it. I while you guys have been talking, I've been this same thing has been ringing through my head, and it actually from Sean taught me this, and it was from our first podcast ever together. We talked about mindfulness, and we sat down and for an hour, and Sean had never talked about mindfulness before, neither had I, but we just sat down and discussed it, and I believe he was talking about being able to take the time to taste his coffee, to really taste his coffee, to go through each piece of it and engage in the moment. And to answer your question, James, this is how I do it, is that in each thing that I'm doing, I try to engage in that mindful moment, in that recognition of what is right now, right here, what is. So at the end of this, I'm actually going to go upstairs and have some pepperoni sticks from the elk that's actually hanging on my wall right here. And I'm going to take that moment to find gratitude for the elk, for the trip. I'm going to remember being out in the wind with the 90-mile-an-hour wind smashing me in the face for 8 hours before I actually got this guy. That kind of stuff. And I do that with pretty much everything I do, and especially when I find myself in a negative mindset, when I'm not feeling great, or I'm just like, oh man, there's this, and I gotta do these things, and but the blah, and there's this, and there's that, and I will take a second. I'll feel my pen. I'll pick up my coffee cup, whatever it is. I'll feel something, bring myself right to this moment, and that gives me gratitude for everything that I have. Because as Dave said, we've all seen worse, a lot worse, a lot worse. And just the fact that we're sitting here in our own little houses with all of our microphones and all of our cameras and our computers and all this other stuff, this is a grateful moment for me. I get to be a part of this right here, right now. And if the world ends in the next instant, I'm happy with what I've done here, and I get to live every moment. I get to do my best every day. So that's my answer to the question, James.
Can I just throw in something? It's
Sure.
a bit of a Debbie Downer, though.
Oh, no.
I'm going to be a Debbie Downer. And it's a bit of a hard one, man. It's a bit of a hard one. And I don't want to build it out into a global catastrophe. But someone hit me up in my DMs this morning, and we're chirping about something. And I said, hey, listen, I don't want to put too much of an edge on the conversation, but I'm just going to hit you with the reality of what I was thinking out on my ride yesterday. As I was shredding the mountain bike trail, for whatever reason, and I'm not questioning why, this thought popped into my head. Man, we ain't too far away from a global nuclear disaster. And I don't want to paint out all the politics of it. I don't want to talk about who's who in the zoo. I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying that, maybe we're not on the precipice, but we ain't too far from something going dramatically wrong. And if you look at the statistics of a nuclear winter, it doesn't have to be a full exchange, a full planetary exchange, but if it's just we'll call it a small exchange, no good can come of that. And so as I was out on my ride, shredding a corner, this popped into my head. And the immediate thing that I said to myself next was, all the more reason to enjoy this ride. And I almost put out a post yesterday after my ride that said to the world, or anyone who cares what I've got to say, and it's this: man, if there was a nuclear catastrophe gonna hit in the next 48 hours, like 48 hours from now, what would you do? I didn't want to make it a week from now, because there'd be guys that I know that would think, okay, well, I need two days to hang out with my family, and I got to clean up some loose ends at work. And then, it just gets a little crazy. But if you only had 48 hours, is what I started telling myself out on the trail, what would I do? And for sure, one of the things would be to squeeze in another ride. And one of them would be to squeeze in a BJJ roll. And one of them would be to squeeze in more hugs with my family. And one would be to scratch my dog's ear again. And one would be to brew another coffee. And by the way, and I know this might sound bizarre, but I did tell myself on that ride, and I would probably do one more podcast. Why? Why would I do a podcast is what I thought to myself. And here's why. This is the answer I gave myself. Now I'm speaking in third party, which is a bit weird. Now I'm calling myself Sean. So what I did think was, because if I check all of the boxes off on all of the things that I do in my life that are positive and are making a difference, believe it or not, one of those things is podcasting. And so I would probably want to connect with the people that I connect with on a regular basis out there in the digosphere and just say, hey, boys, it's been good knowing you. I hope you're all doing well. Enjoy the time with your family. See you on the other side, or whatever I would say. But I would want to check that box as well, because it is part of my life and it is a positive part of my life. So again, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but this whole you've got 48 hours until things get lit up, it's not a bad way to live your life.
That's a great point. Yeah. What do you got, Dave?
This is for my own learning, but can I make a request? Can James, can you and Eric answer that question? Because I want to hear your answers. Then I'll to compare
Absolutely.
mine. I don't mean
James, what do you
compare,
got?
but oh no,
Yeah,
Chance, you as well. Chance, you as well, please.
Okay. Well, let's start with James, and then we'll work our way around. Go for it.
Firstly, I mean, that we're talking about gratitude, we're talking about being present, then that kind of mindset is an invaluable way of looking at the what ifs to put you back into making the most of every day. What I think of, though, when I'm listening to Sean talking, is one of my guests, I always forget who it was now, but they made a really interesting point. They said, and this is not political, I'm just using an example of the way they were viewing. They said, America is the poster child for democracy. If you were a country on the outside looking in, would you want to buy into that philosophy? And the reason I say that is that then puts the onus back on every single person, whether it's Dave in his household with his creed, taking after, care of his kids and hopefully raising kind, compassionate children that then themselves will add value to the world. If you look at it that way and you reclaim your piece of whether this country moves towards war or moves towards peace, and I say towards war, that's apathy. That's allowing yourself to be distracted by soap operas and sports games and tweets and other divisive measures. Or do you roll up your sleeves, look around your own home first and say, I'm gonna be a better father, I'm gonna be a better husband, or whatever role you play in that household. And then you step outside your front door and you go, I'm gonna be a mentor, I'm a plumber, I'm gonna teach young boys and girls how to fix toilets and taps, or I'm a coach, or whatever it is. But I think that's what I would almost do with the absolute kind of unquashable optimism that I have, is like, we got 48 hours to save the world. You know what I mean? Now, that does not at the detriment of spending time with everything, but what if everyone stood side by side and said, nah, this isn't happening? And I think you're right. We're kind of there now. It's not 48 hours, I hope, but this is how we've kind of devolved, whether it's the health of the nation. We've got an obesity epidemic, we've got a mental health crisis, we've got all these things. If we allow ourselves to slowly kind of slide down, what happens to our families under the flag of our nation becomes, it's out of our hands completely. The more connected we are to our country, the more we can not only help people within the States, but we can start helping the people of Haiti, the people of, these other people that are desperate around us. And maybe rather than poking the bear and looking for war, we do the opposite and we become not world police, but world diplomats. So I think that this terrifying possibility on the horizon is a call to action for every man and woman in the US at this point, as we have this conversation, or Canada or the UK, that enough is enough, that we need to all act. Otherwise, people are going to start wars without your consent, and it's going to be over something that is completely detached from your family values. I mean, you want your children to grow up one day, you want them to be healthy, you want to be kind, you want them to be fed, you want them to be educated. And if we do nothing and these kind of things happen, shame on us. Shame on us. But
the question is, what would you do if you had 48 hours? So what would specifically, I know, I hear you. I agree with you, but what's your answer to the 48 hours?
I agree with Sean. I mean, hopefully the things that you are doing now are the things that you would do in the last 48 hours. So this conversation could go one of two ways: that you would keep doing the things because, as we've had this discussion, you found this amazing circle of people, you've loved your partner as hard as you can, you adore your kids as much as you can, you spend time with them, you found passions, jiu-jitsu, horse riding, whatever it is, and you would do that. You'd sit outside on your rock in your meadow, feel the sun on your face, smell the flowers. Or maybe you got 48 hours to finally realize that you've missed the point a little bit, and you go find those things when you've got 2 days left.
James is the ultimate podcaster, avoiding the question by not answering himself. I like it. Eric, what about you? What are you thinking?
Yeah, man. I want to take a moment just because when Dave was saying, hey, like you kind of maybe you're brushing your teeth and you're like, hey, I'm just going to be grateful now, right? You're building that habit. And even to roll into Sean's perfect day, right, is doing a lot of the things he does every day, right? And I think there's so much beauty in that. And James hit on it too. So I'm going to build on that and continue that momentum to say, yeah, the beauty of 48 hours is it's not just like 2 hours where everyone's just going to be like, well, I'm just going to hold like my family close, right? And just kind of brace for impact. Uh, Really, I think that where everyone should be, hopefully, is just recognizing that that could be 48 hours of gratitude. So, whereas that could be a Debbie Downer, like it's our choice whether we want to look at that like a Debbie Downer moment or whether we want to say, hey, like this is the time where brass tacks, you do what is important and you do the most perfect 48 hours, the most beautiful, humbling, grateful 48 hours that can be, which is to stare at the sunrise, right? It's to wake up and have your coffee. Hopefully you're drinking the good coffee like every day that like that you can afford within reason, that you really enjoy, that enhances your life, right? Hopefully it's not to be hedonistic, right? Because if the exercise takes you to like, well, I'm just gonna go, you know, I'll just leave you to your details as you think of the most hedonistic kind of way to live. People are already doing that, right? People are already living hedonistic lives. That's their choice. And hopefully it doesn't go to this fear place where I'm going to bed down and I'm going to start digging in my backyard, right? I'm going to get the best bunker I can in the 48 hours. Hopefully that's not it either, because ultimately, hopefully we don't feel super afraid if we've been living life the way we ought to, the way that serves us and our spirit and our purpose. And so, to go into the details, very much in line with what you guys say. I mean, even when you say, hey, when you're brushing your teeth, experience gratitude, like, yeah, if you don't brush your teeth, it's like a crappy day. You feel gross, right? Like, so like, I want to feel clean teeth. I want to be grateful for my teeth. I'm going to take care of my teeth for another day. I can't think of a good day where I haven't exerted myself physically in some way, right? So some people are going to hear, you're going to work out in your last 48 hours. I'm like, yeah, because it makes me right. It makes me feel good. I feel accomplished. And maybe there's that notion, right? Maybe you got 48 hours left, but to live the life like, maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're all wrong. And like, if I set up these 48 hours great, then it's going to make the next 72 even better. And it's going to make next week even better. And just to live life with that peace, I think is crucial.
Yeah. What do you got, James?
Just quickly, being British, I'm grateful every time I brush my teeth because I have them still. So I just want to put that in there.
I love it. I love it. So I think what we're talking about, at least in my mind, is acceptance of mortality, right? Because we all know that like life ends, right? But it's kind of, when you're young, especially in the Western world, it's like it's long off. When I'm 80 or 90, I'll worry about that. But it's really, we are all kind of at 48 hours away at all times. Really, I mean, like I could step out and get whacked by a bus, right? It's pretty simple. And while you were talking, Eric, I had this image pop into my head, and it's from Lord of the Rings. And so I had to look up the quote. So I'm going to quote this real fast. And it is, Frodo says, "I wish it need not have happened in my time." "So do I," said Gandalf, "and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." And I think that is such a poignant quote in this thing, in this question. For myself, very similar. For my 48 hours, I mean, I would spend time with my family. I would hang out with them. I would take my boys to the BJJ mats, and we would roll around and laugh and have fun and enjoy the moment for 48 hours. That's what I would do. I would spend it going out for walks. I would spend it on the mats. I would spend it on here if anybody else wanted to jump on a conversation, right? I would do the things that I do every day because I enjoyed play the guitar for an hour or two, right? I would be in the moment for those 48 hours, and that's where I would go through the whole thing. Dave, you want to hit us with yours now that you've heard everybody else's answer?
Sure. And so let me just, as you guys are speaking, and let me just, spoiler alert, mine is not anything close to yours, and maybe I wish it was. But when I'm listening to you guys, what I hear is, do you remember Young Guns when Billy the Kid is telling the story about the end of the world and the three guys playing pinochle, and someone comes running and says, "Hey, the world's ending. You've got an hour to live." And one guy jumps up and says, "Oh, I got to go to the church and pray." The next guy jumps up and says, "Oh, I'm going to the brothel, find my favorite girl." And the last guy sits down, doesn't move at all. And they're like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I will finish the game, my friends. I'm going to finish the game." Right. And so like, that's what you guys are talking about, right? Like you're in the game and you're going to sit down and finish it. And that's not me. Right. And so when I talk about my purpose and that creed that I talk about, and in 48 hours means something versus the 2 hours or the 1 hour where I know there's nothing I can do. So I have 48 hours. I have already, I'm going to initiate exfil plan alpha, Bravo, Charlie, whichever one fits the mold, right? Because within that creed, like, again, my purpose is to protect my family. And in there somewhere is I will never quit, no matter what. And so, and it's not fear-based, Eric. There's no fear involved whatsoever. It's literally my day-to-day right now is preparing for that moment. And it's not negative. It's not scary. I'm not worried about it. It doesn't cause me anxiety. It gives me a purpose, right? My family is my purpose. My daughter and my wife are my only purpose. The only reason I'm here, the only reason I do anything, right? And so to execute that plan, and along the ways, like because I don't believe, when you see people die, a lot of times it looks almost like they're surprised, as if like surprised that it could happen to them, right? Like we all think we're special, that, oh, it's not going to happen to me. And when it does, there's this register of surprise, it seems. And so, and I still have that, I guess, like, well, everyone else is going to die, but I'm not. Like there's a chance and I'm going to take that chance and I'm going to show my daughters that chance and we're going to go and we're going to exfil this plan. Everything we have is preparing for that plan, right? And, and I don't know how to rectify all three of your answers to mine, right? I just don't. I know that the end of my creed, and I know this is true, that someday my fight will end. I will lay down my sword and my fight will end. But that day is not today. And that day will never come until I can't do it anymore. And so as long as I guess I have that breath, like my job is to do that. And so like, that's where my creed goes to. And it's not idealistic. I'm not trying to do, but like literally every day, everything I do is geared towards that goal.
Yeah, if I can cut in, it's not to reinterpret your creed by any means, but for me, it's like if to protect my daughter, right? She's almost 5. If to protect her, it could be internalized in one way to say, hey, yeah, get to digging, get in that crawl space and dig, right? But to also protect her, like I want to teach her something, and I want to see the wonderment in her eyes. I want to play with her. I want to make her laugh, and like that's protecting her, right? And if she doesn't see dad for the next 40 hours because he's digging, like that's not it for me, right? And so I appreciate the creed. Actually, like I wrote down one thing out of this whole thing. Usually I'm taking notes because it's hard to keep up with you fellas. But I wrote creed, and I want to start working on my creed, right? And I found at 38, I'm finding a level of confidence that I haven't had, that I thought I kind of had in a lot of ways in life and approach and career. But creed is one. So I thank you for that. But I just want to kind of inject that as maybe for the listeners as how you internalize, how you conceptualize these things.
Sure. And let me rebut, and I take your point, and allow me to, I don't say rebut because I don't think we're disagreeing. So again, for me, because this is my purpose, that last 48 hours wouldn't be spent digging. It would be enacting the plan that we've had in place for the entire time. You know what I'm saying? And so like, and she's fully aware of it. And so like, they're coming with me and they're going to be right there with me. And you asked my daughter from the time she was 3, and I say, hey, Carmela, what do we say to death? She says, "Not today, death." Right?
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, she's just, it's
just Arya Stark, right?
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And so, but she's been conditioned to that. Everything from the dark, right? And she, all the kids are afraid of the dark, and she's afraid of the dark. And I try to tell her, well, if you're afraid of the dark, and this is anything, if you hate running up hills, then everyone hates running up hills, right? So why not if you hate the water, that's the Navy thing, right? If you hate the water, then everybody probably hates the water, doesn't feel comfortable in the water. So why not focus our lives on making where everyone else feels uncomfortable the place where the most comfortable, right? And so that's where we get that advantage. When we're talking about races, make your enemy in the race your friend during training, right? Shifting that mindset, identifying those things that are awful, that everybody hates, and focusing a lot of your attention on that, because that's where you can get the edge. When everyone else is afraid of the dark, make the dark your friend. Become Bane. Become forged by it, right? Not just adopting it.
I like it.
I do. There's one thing that I've heard as the common thread throughout all of this, irrespective of what anyone's plans would be for the 48-hour period. It's that the time in the 48 hours would be spent intentionally. And that's a massive difference between day-to-day life and the 48 hours that you've got left in your life. That last 48 hours, everyone gets super freaking intentional. No one is probably going to hop on their mountain bike and ride up to a rock and dawdle and not pay attention. I mean, I'm not saying that you're going to be looking at your watch every minute and thinking, okay, my master plan is I've got 37 minutes up here on this rock on my mountain bike. Then I got to sprint home. I've got to go hug my family at 12:04 p.m. And no one's doing that. But you're going to be intentional with your time. You're not going to dawdle. You're not going to waste. You're not going to be inefficient or ineffective during those 48 hours. You will intentionally deploy whatever life energy you've got left into living a freaking awesome life, whatever that means to you. Now, why would we do it only in those last 48 hours, but so few can do it in their day-to-day if there was no last 48 hours? That is the missing piece sometimes, is people only see the importance of the moment by making it a catastrophic, a cataclysm. That's what I'm going to face. That's how I'm going to have to re-engage with how rich my life is, because of the distractions, because of whatever, because of society, because of the institutions, because of the system that we all live in. Sometimes people get worn down and they lose their intentionality of life. And so I think the 48-hour cycle kind of puts some of that intention back into someone's perspective on how they would run their program versus currently how they're running their program.
I like that. James, what did you just write down? I saw you. Every time I'm watching.
It's kind of going back to something, well, I guess the question I asked you guys, but I think this ties also with being present, is back to the gratitude piece. And I think when I was reflecting, listening to all your answers, it occurred to me that to truly have gratitude, you first have to have humility. And so, for example, if you watch reality television because then it just makes you feel better about your life, that's not humility and that's not gratitude. You know what I mean? But if you, for example, rather than focus on beating your chest and saying that you're in the greatest country in the world, ask yourself, what are the areas that I can impact in this world? And then what can I learn from other people in this world? Because again, if you truly believe and you have no humility and you believe that this is the best, you're not going to be present, because you're not going to have gratitude, because you've literally got no barometer on what you've got. And I don't think everyone has the capacity to travel to Haiti or the Sudan or, some areas that we help them reframe how much we actually have. But if you can just take a step back and look around again, like look in your actual neighborhood, in your town, in your whatever it is, and find some people that are not doing as well as you, then that will then also come back to you, because you will then be able to have some gratitude and therefore be present. But if you believe that you're in the best country in the world, and the political figure that you are vying for is the best leader, you're not. How are you going to be present if you can't simply even be humble enough to be appreciative of what you have? So I think when it comes to using those 48 hours, I think in a weird way, humility is incredibly important.
I could not agree more. And I'm gonna come back all the way to the beginning here because Sean had mentioned something earlier that I think plays into this, and I'm gonna bring it up again. So he had said earlier that when he goes for something and it doesn't work and he kind of lets down the team and he's just like, oh man, I want a mulligan. I want to do this. Like, give me another shot at this. And it again kind of reminded me of Sisyphus and the fact that you get the boulder up the hill and then it's at the bottom, and then you get the boulder up the hill and then it's at the bottom. But those mulligans aren't. It's not a complete reset. It's not like you wake up every morning going like, oh, I got to learn life all over again. Like, oh no, there's a boulder here. Oh gee, and you have to do that whole sequence again. It's that you're coming into it with experience, right? You've now rolled the boulder up a million times, and Sean and I have talked about this many times on the podcast in terms of understanding, your method and your process, and making sure that you can just apply it to a new thing. But it goes into this concept of understanding your mortality, in that when you wake up, that's your mulligan. All right, now you got today. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to spend your time watching reality television because it makes you feel better about yourself for a few seconds? Or are you going to live a better life? Are you going to turn the TV off and go for a walk? And it reminded me, Dave, you were saying earlier about, there's some other dads in your neighborhood that are up at 5 a.m. working out, right? That's the impact. That's that next level of impact. Instead of trying to fix the world on the other side of the world, you're going to, hey man, you guys want to work out together? Let's get a little gang together. And then other people are going to see that in the mornings going like, what are they doing out there? And then one day somebody's going to go, I mean, maybe should I go ask them if I want to, I kind of want to get in better shape. Hey, what are you guys doing? And then that engages that person, engages that. And I think it's much more of a personal engagement. And so I want to ask you guys this question, is that, do you think that the removal of time, do you think, like, from your own concept of betterment, of living your life, if you just remove the concept of, oh, I got to get here, and then I got to do these things, and there's timelines and there's things, do you think if you just remove that concept of just, okay, I want to get better, it doesn't matter how long it takes, doesn't matter doesn't matter that I have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, it just means that I want to be better, whatever that takes, and then time is no longer a consequence. Do you think that's the way forward here? I'm going to start with Dave because you look like you got something on your mind. What do you got?
I think you have to do that. And this goes back to exactly what you said, the Sisyphus, the goal setting, looking forward versus looking back at what you've done and how far you've come to allow you to keep going, right? Back to the idea of the infinite game versus the finite game, right? And realizing that, so like the time individual hours exist, but collectively over the course of your life, eliminating the concept of I'm going to arrive, I have to put in 10 years, 10,000 hours, right? Whatever. And just knowing that I have to do this. And, this is why I think that to be honest and to tell the truth, and we see these people all over the internet and stuff, and like and James, you alluded to this too, like going back to the simple things, right? It's not freaking rocket science. Like, I used to think nutrition is so hard. It's you eat less, burn more than you eat, right? Like, that's it. Burn more than you freaking eat. Track what you eat and burn 300 calories more than that every day forever until you reach your goal, and then stay at, like, it's simple. It's not easy. But it's simple, and just do that forever. Like, don't worry about, I'm going to get to the time and all that sort of stuff. And, and just to real quick, like, one of the things that I've talked last time I argued with myself last time, Sean, about how I hate systems. And I realized I'm absolutely 100% a systems guy, and I need systems to be successful. An example of this is a system that I used, and it was one of the things you had to do was take a progress picture every day. And so, I got to the first time I did it, I got to day 50 or whatever. And like, I was looking in the mirror and I'm like, I look awful. Like, this is terrible. Like, whatever I'm doing isn't working. Right. And so, and I literally saw that, like, I full blown have body dysmorphia. Like, I saw it. But then I had 50 days of progress pictures to go back and look. So I had hard evidence of where I've come from, and my brain could no longer distort that. And so now in the past, what I would have done, I wouldn't have been like, oh, I'm going to go eat a bunch of stuff. I would have said, okay, this program's not working. Let me switch to another program, and let me switch to another program, and never get through the clouds, through the mist to get to that level where I can actually see through it, because I'd be like, I got to change it. I must be going the wrong way. Let me take another path. And I never actually get there. And so having that system in place that allows you to be in the moment today, and then when you need the motivation, looking back at how far you've come, but again, having hard evidence to refute the annoying brain that we have that is the ultimate salesman and knows exactly what to do to get us to take the easy road. At least mine does.
Yeah, mine does too. Don't worry about that. James, what are you thinking on this?
I'm going to just move it slightly over, because one of the concepts I've always loved, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but that quote that goes something like, how old would you think you were if you didn't know how old you were? And I love that. So taking away, like you said, time constraints and those kind of things. And by the way, body dysmorphia, it's every single one of us. I still look in the mirror and think that I'm a 95-pound stick insect when I look in the mirror. So I totally feel you there. But I love that concept, because I think one of the most detrimental things that's happened, and it ties into the struggles with body dysmorphia and the weight gains and struggles that people have, is we've completely distorted what a health span looks like in a human being and what a 40-year-old looks like. I'm about to turn 50 in 2 weeks. And, if I kind of went into my town and dragnetted a bunch of 50-year-olds, sadly, I would assume that quite a few of them were really struggling with their health. And that's because they've been sold, well, ask your doctor for this if your ding dong isn't working anymore, or, whatever it is. We're just sold pills and potions, and they normalize. I mean, all our bloody wheelchairs in hospitals that I used to push around as a paramedic almost look like a joke. They're so damn big. So we've normalized ill health younger and younger and younger. And if you contrast that with, for example, Okinawa, where I think still they have the highest per capita number of centenarians, people 100 and older. And if you look at that particular culture, it's not so much a blue zones diet type thing. They're like children still, at least in the documentaries that I've seen. They play, they sing, they play musical instruments. I mean, they do things that we did as kids. And so the complete mindset, the mindset seems to be completely different than, well, life after 40, rolls his eyes and pops 2 pills. So I think, disregarding that sense of time isn't even so much just in a day, but like in a lifespan. We need to really take a step back and reframe, what should a 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old be able to do? And if you ever read those What to Expect When You're Expecting books, I was all in as a dad. I was reading all the baby books. And it was so well done, because it was like, should be able to, should probably be able to, might be able to, might even be able to, each of these benchmarks. And, you look at, I just shared a video of a Haitian man. It was a while ago now, 80-something years old. And he was like, well, I could retire, I suppose, but I don't want to be a burden to my kids. That guy could have been on the front cover of any muscle and fitness magazine. And he was a farmer. So I think that's the big thing, is not even so much the micro, with these time constraints and goals and all the things that we've unpacked today, but the macro. I think we need to reframe the incredible innate ability to thrive the human body has, if you give it the right environment, which is going back to 150 years ago, when we moved a lot, we ate natural food, and we were outside during the day and we slept during the night.
Yeah, 100%. And there's nothing quite like farmer strength. Like that's a whole other ball of wax, right? Eric, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just want to just kind of follow up on what these gentlemen have said, and it's so much a mindset, right? Like, we put these limiting, and this could go for the last, I guess, the whole conversation, but what limitations are we allowing? What limitations are we accepting that we are not even recognizing, right? Where are we constraining ourselves? And to speak to literally this this notion of like what you're capable of at a certain age. I do it in some ways, right? Like, I talk about how my fitness ideology has shifted because I'm my late 30s, but at the same time, like I have to caveat it, and I should caveat it with I feel great. Like I feel great in my late 30s. I'm changing some of the things I'm doing, but it doesn't mean I can't be fit. It doesn't mean I can't have energy and be strong and be active, all these things, right? And in first responder culture, those are where my brain goes and some of the recent conversation points. But we say so many things, recognizing that it's hard, and we focus on these things. We over focus, right? So maybe going all the way back to the beginning of these negative thoughts, right? We say, hey, you're going to look at the world differently. Hey, your relationships are going to be hard. It's going to be hard for you to have friends outside of police work. You're going to have issues with your marital life. You're going to have issues with your kids. Like, why do we say that? We could say, hey, there are traditional challenges, but if you take care of you, if you take care of your people, if you take care of your family, like it's fantastic, right? I feel so grateful. I had the conversation with my wife literally last night, and we were reflecting. We've been married 7 years, been together around 12. And we're like, and I kind of like jokingly, I was like, hey, like everyone keeps saying marriage is hard. Do you feel like it's hard? And she's like, I don't feel like it's hard. I mean, like, there's hard things. I was like, sure, like, there's hard things in life, but life's not hard. It doesn't have to be hard. But the more we say it, we say marriage is hard. It's almost in every like wedding reception speech, marriage is hard. Like, why do we say this? Why do we allow ourselves to say this? So rather than that, I said, as we kept talking, she's like, I think dating and cohabitating, learning to cohabitate was hard. And now we have a lot of healthy routines and habits. I'm like, yeah, like being single in a lot of ways is hard, right? Like trying to figure out who you can match up, who can you live life with. That's hard. So yeah, all to say, just where are we defining what lanes are we painting that might be completely arbitrary, and trying to smash them, like trying to destroy them.
100%. Sean, what are you thinking?
Well, based on what Dave said, I'm along the same lines of I don't think I'm the best at anything. I just think I've got to get better at the thing. I don't think I'm ever going to be the best. I just try to be better. And so there is no end to anything. There is no finish line of excellence. There's just always the relentless and eternal pursuit of excellence until the day I die. That's what I was taught. That's what I like. That's what makes me happy is the hunt, the pursuit. And so to play that into marriage, just since Eric has just come off of that, um, you know, we just spent my wife and I just spent 7 weeks in Asia at the end of last year. And we've been married for plus of 20 years. And to your point, it's a constant work in progress. And there's nothing to help you understand that better than being in a foreign country in a very small hotel room for week after week after week. I mean, you learn a thing or two. Nothing, nothing, nothing is ever fully figured out. Nothing is ever perfect. Nothing is ever the way you want it to be. Life is a work in progress as far as I'm concerned. And there is no best moment. There's only better with the eye towards making it even better. That's how I like to live my life. Second thing I'd like to say is since, not that it's ageism, but since age has come up, I have been giving it a little bit of thought recently, and I know it's a fairly big topic, so I'll keep this brief. There's a dude on Instagram. I think his call sign is Bill Maeda.
Yeah.
He's freaking ripped, man.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whenever the idea of age comes up, I don't know why, but he pops into my head as an excellent example of a dude who's just freaking crushing it and putting it out there on the daily. And he's kind of inspiring. And why he's inspiring is not because he cracks it out of the park on the regular. It's that he puts his age in there. And I think he's now 54 or 55 or 56, I forget. But every time I look at his age, I think, the freaking dude is getting up there and he's still making me look like a chump. What the heck? I've got to pick up the pace. And so I'm 60. I've lived a pretty decent life to get me to a point where I can still kick a little bit of ass at 60. And so you're never going to kick ass at 60 if you're a slob. You just ain't. You've got to get your act wired tight in order to kick ass at 60. And if your act isn't tight now, today's the day to make it tight. Because if you want to go smash out all the things at 60, It's the only way you can do it is to keep it tight now and keep it tight for the rest of your life, like Bill. And so I've been looking at that guy for a little while thinking, I wonder if I should do something similar. I wonder if I should just put up on my IG from time to time, age 60, period. Just to get other people to not maybe inspire them, but just to get people to sit up and pay attention to, I can be even better than that. That's what I'm hoping for, is people could use what I'm doing at 60 to tell themselves that they're going to do it even bigger at 60. And so age is an interesting thing that can either demotivate someone or remotivate someone, depending on, if we're talking social media, whether when you click on your social media and you see Bill, you say to yourself, oh no, or you say to yourself, oh yeah. And so that is mindset, man. How you run your life is how your life ends up.
100%. I just looked it up. Bill Maeda, excuse me, is 55. And the post he just put out today is a 70-pound lockjaw push-up. So like he's got like a resistance band tied to a 70-pound kettlebell in his mouth while he does a push-up on rings. Like, it's insane.
Of course.
So follow that
as
guy.
you do. Yeah.
As you do, right? Yeah, of course. But if you're not following that guy, you should be, and he is absolutely inspiring. The thing that kicked in my head while we were talking about this was the fact that it is age is kind of interesting. James, you put up, if you walk around your neighborhood and you find 50-year-olds and look at like, oh man, what's the average here? If you look at Sean as the example of 60-year-olds, most 60-year-olds don't look like Sean, right? Most 40-year-olds don't look like me, or most 38-year-olds don't look like Eric, right? And when you look around the world, in the Western world, the average is not what we think it is. And I think that's part of the recognition, is that if you only look at yourself and say, well, this is what you should look like. No, it's not. You can go that much farther. You can look at Bill and say, man, that guy. You can look at Sean and go, okay, I got work to do. Right? And it's that, again, as we say all the time, constant pursuit. You got to find something new, get to the top of the hill. Cool. Find something new. Let that rock roll back down. Do it again. But we're almost at 2 hours now. And I just want to say thank you guys. This has been fantastic conversation. And I know that we could probably sit here for the rest of the day, but I do need to get some stuff done before I go get my kids today. So let's get some final thoughts on anything that we've talked about, on everything that we've talked about, or anything still bubbling in the back of your brain. Eric, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Gentlemen, it's gone quickly. I also have to hop off. But lastly, I mean, we've talked about mindset so many times, and inputs and what's coming in, right? And these things inform your mindset. So those listening in, those tuning in, like, you're on the right track. And I feel very humbled to be of this group, right? And because iron sharpens iron, and you choose your inputs, and you can take agency in all that in light of everything we're talking about: gratitude, mindset, autonomy.
Love it. James, final thoughts?
I think the only thing I would add in to everything we've talked about, which has been phenomenal, and again, if you look at Sean, there's no way in hell you're thinking 60, so I just want to put that in there. Amazing. But also, don't forget to give yourself some grace. Like, for example, right now I'm writing a second book, and it is taking all of my time. And so jiu-jitsu, I'm down to once a week. Strength and conditioning, I'm not at the moment, because there are times, where life's given you 2 boulders instead of 1 for a few weeks. So I think that's a big part too. The rest and recovery, but also just sometimes, your child gets sick, whatever it is. Don't forget that, yes, we're kind of blazing the path, but when things happen, it's okay to just take a tactical pause, take a knee for a moment, regroup, and then push forward again.
Absolutely. Let the boulder roll back down the hill and start over. Dave, final thoughts?
I love coming on here, and I love Sean said something earlier about the tribe And James, you said the same thing, is finding motivation within the tribe from the guy and girl standing next to you. And uh, it's very hard to find when you know, in life for me nowadays. And it's great to have these things to touch with it. I think finally, you know, I was thinking about this earlier, that the reason my answer in that 48 hours was the way it was is because I have now replaced my tribe with my family, right? And it's stronger than it ever was before. And so and that's where the grace and the gratitude comes in, because, you know, they saved my life, and now I owe them the same favor.
Outstanding. Sean, final thoughts?
I dig that, man. I dig that wrap up. That is a good way to look at things and as to who we owe what to. And so I do owe my family a lot. I owe you guys a lot. I owe the internet a lot. I owe a lot of things to a lot of people. And you're probably right, Dave, to kind of at the tail end have me. I will now be thinking about how to not prioritize or put in a pecking order of who's who in the zoo and what's most important. But I think not to a granular level anyway, but I think at a macro level, from time to time, we should ascertain what our primary focuses are, what we're most grateful for, what is our guiding light, or who we are at our core, or what we would give our lives for. These are all big questions that help refine the other aspect of, oh yes, or oh no. That's all I'll leave it at.
Love it. I just want to hit these real quick. We had a couple comments throughout, and so Amir Moisey jumped in here and said, "Much love, men. Every Friday, I look forward to this." Absolutely. Love doing this. And Doc Carlos jumped in here. Best tribe to have is family. And could not agree more. Family is key, especially the family that you choose. That is the big one. And I'm going to finish this off with the same quote I said a little while ago. I think it's just poignant to everything we've talked about. It is, I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And I think that is the key point throughout this whole conversation. What are you going to do with your time? So, as we all learn, build, and grow, we're going to keep carrying on. Chimo, everybody.
Chimo.
Hey Collective, Big Bird here. Thanks so much for watching the episode. Really appreciate the support. It has been fantastic recording these and having these conversations. I can't thank you enough. If you'd like to watch any other ones, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to listen to another awesome convo, I got one right here. Your choice. Chimo.